Hey guys, so here we are. We're going to wire wrap some ends onto a little bit of chain using 20 gauge copper wire. And here I'm just using my hands to straighten out the wire to keep it nice and soft. I'm not using a hammer or a piece of steel block or wooden block. So there's my lobster clasp. And I'm going to take a bit of 20 gauge wire, approximately 1 3/4 to 2 inches, maybe a little bit longer. And I've got my chain nose plier and my round nose plier. So the round nose plier stays in my left hand and the chain nose stays in my right. We're going to go around the round nose. The shorter end of the wire is technically the front of your wire wrap, and it stays in the top. And here we're going to grab it and then loop it around to the back and then kink up that long tail and then do another full rotation around. You could technically do it as many times as you want for a longer mid section of your wire wrap, but going around 1.5 times is enough. So you cut it off and you use your chain nose to kind of nibble down the end of the wire so it's not scraping up and bothering you. Make another loop. And repeat. Move it halfway down. Kink up the other side. Go full rotation. And then use your chain nose pliers to push down the ends. Now this time we'll be wrapping the catch. So here we're making a larger loop than for the lobster clasp, which was just used to hold on to the two pieces, whereas this will act as the actual catch. So I want the loop, the circle, to be a little bit more substantial in size, so it's easier to grasp onto. And you terminate that loop without attaching it to anything. So we're going to do the other end, and the other end I'm doing slightly smaller, and I'm also facing the opposite direction. So one is facing you and the other one is facing sideways. You don't have to do it this way, but I like it for this particular situation. And then here's the clip, and nibbling the little ends down. Alright guys, so I've got some vintage beads here, and they already have these head pins on them. It's basically a piece of long wire that has a flat end, and it acts as the stop. And these are manufactured like this, but I want to add them to my little chain that I just made. And I don't like the brass mixing with the copper chain, so I'm actually going to remove these parts and make a little trio line as a pendant. So this one's going to be for the top piece, and you want it to act as the bail, so it needs to be large enough to run through the chain. And then also be mindful, if you've already made your ends, I always do the ends at the last, as the last step, but this time I didn't. You want to make sure that your quote-unquote bail is big enough to either fit through your pre-made chain, or you can just loop it on there yourself while you're making it, which is what I'm gonna do right now. Now, as far as chain goes, there is a right and a left side. We live in a right-handed world, so the clasp is on the right and the catch is on the left. So when I make my bail, I also want to make sure that the front, quote unquote, is, you know, in the right position. Slide this through, and then we're going to make a little loop on the bottom. And I want it to be opposite. That's what I'm gonna do. Now I don't need the loops top and bottom to match because they're functioning differently. I cut this wire a little bit short. I actually forgot to account for the top bail being so large, and then with this bead being so bulbous, it does cause some issues. But we'll make it work. So 20 gauge is actually quite difficult to work with. It's just meatier. It doesn't really want to move as easily. And generally, when you're working with chains and beads, the holes tend to be smaller. So again, I'm gonna do opposites on this. So I like the way it looks. So one side is going, you know, front facing, and the other side is going side facing. Generally, you would have, you'd be using, you know, 24 gauge for thinner stuff, and then 26 for, or I'm sorry, 24 for thicker, and then 26 for thinner. So far we've got this. It's terminating right now with an open end. Out of wire, so I'm going to cut a little bit more. I'm going to straighten it out. Cut. There are a variety of things that you can do. You can just hammer it flat. You can just kind of curve it like so, and then smush it in. Like that. And then you could go through and hammer that if you wanted to. And that should be big enough to stop. All right. This little baby on. So I'm going to grab on with my brown nose and really get it nice and tight. So at this point, you're looking at it, it's kind of cocked over to the side. So we're going to take that and I'm going to push up to straighten it out. And now you can see it's pretty straight. I'm going to take the rest of that tail and then do one loop. Now if I wanted it to be longer, I can do a bunch of loops down, and that could be a style, but I prefer mine short and sweet. I wouldn't do less than this though, because then you're gonna have issues. And make sure to straighten everything out. And that's it. Now if I wanted to, I could, in theory, wire wrap all of these beads along and make a chain of beads, right? I can cut the chain anywhere and then add a bead to it, whether it's in even spacings or if it's kind of dotted throughout in like a staccato type random rhythmic way. There's a lot of things that you can do, which could be kind of fun. You could do that with not necessarily beads, but sawed out elements with piercings out of sheet metal. You could do it out of plastic pieces that you cast or cut. There's quite a lot you can do by including wire wrapping, because it is a cold connection, but it you know, can add things like stones and color. Okay, so just to show you guys again, I've got a piece of wire. This is 20 gauge copper. I'm just gonna straighten it out. I'm not gonna hammer it because I don't wanna work hard in it. It's 20 gauge, which is quite thick for wire wrapping. So I don't want it to be any more difficult than it already is. This is a good length to start with. Some people like to work off the spool. I prefer this. It's more manageable. Now, if I'm just gonna make a little figure 8 connector, I'm going to grab onto the piece, maybe a third of the way down. You wanna pick the same spot on your round nose pliers, and you may want to even put a little mark with a Sharpie that tells you exactly where, you know, the spot that you're using, I guess, just so that your circle is actually consistent every time in size. So from here, we're going to move this down, pop this up, and then go around.
cut. And then push down that little part, because you don't want that rubbing up against anything. It's going to snag and it's going to feel uncomfortable. And then repeat. So grab it. I'm doing the figure 8, so it's both facing you. Wrap around. And I'm going to straighten it out a little bit. Clip it. And then snuggle it down. So this could be attached to something. I can attach a bead to it and then attach another little figure 8 and then attach that to a chain. But it makes a great extender or connector piece.